Welcome to the If I Had More Time podcast hosted by Mariners Church. This series invites you into a casual conversation with our senior pastor, Eric Geiger, and our teaching team to hear a few insights and truths they wish they had time to include in the weekend message. We hope you enjoy it. Thanks so much for joining us for the If I Had More Time podcast. My name is Liz Garcia. I'm so excited to be here with our scholar in residence today and one of Eric's best friends, Ed Stetzer.
One of his many best friends.
I think you rank up pretty high. You guys are on the phone all the time, little besties.
Fair.
So great.
Okay, fair. That's fair.
You are. You're one of his trusted phone calls when he's making decisions. He's shared with our teams many a times. But we are really grateful that you're with us this
Got to be a
weekend.
part. Got to be a part. This is when we came to the Talbot School of Theology. I was invited to be dean there. I would not have said yes if I also wasn't saying yes to Mariners Church to be teaching pastor and scholar in residence. So it's a key part of why we moved to California. So it wasn't like an afterthought. In my weighing whether to leave Wheaton College and the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center, Mariners was a big part of that.
Wow.
So,
that means a lot. It's a great honor. Great honor to be on a team with you. We do wish that your sweet daughter, Jacqueline, could be with us today.
Yes, the amazing Jacqueline. She's an illustration in the sermon. If you haven't yet listened to or watched the sermon, you probably should watch it because it doesn't make much sense without it.
That's pretty important.
There's some video stuff in there. But Jacqueline, when she was little, the kids, I have 3 daughters, and when I use them in an illustration, I got to pay them, and they'd negotiate the fee. So, I think I gave her $1 for the original picture that people saw on the screen. Well, this time she said, well, I'm a business major now. And so she required $50. She's a junior business major. So it cost me $50 to use that illustration. But, it's your kid in college. You're going to send him $50 anyway.
Come on.
But she felt good about it, got a pound of flesh, dad paid, and she's happy. So
that's perfect.
She was willing to redo the picture. So,
oh my goodness! Do a little side by side.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we might need to do that.
Maybe
awesome.
Maybe not. There's a few people that watch these sermons, so I'm like, maybe not. She might want to stay anonymous.
Yeah,
so.
Good for her. Good for her. Well, it was. a really helpful illustration as we were chatting beforehand. Money is sensitive.
Yeah,
we've got a lot of fear and personal stories tied to it. So when you kind of disarmed all of us when we used the Cheez-It currency.
Well, I'm hoping, because again, even at one point when we kind of revealed the big Cheez-It box, you could put up, the whole point is it's like a giant dollar. It's a currency. And again, when this took place centuries ago, they didn't bring dollar bills to the offering. They would have offered food often. Like they bring animals and they bring food and there's some level of currency, but not in the same way. And so, that's not far from it. But also, too, I think everyone got the point that we're talking about money.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, having a big dollar bill sign on the stage seemed like a lot for a church. So
it was probably wise.
Yeah.
Probably wise. Really.
And Cheez-Its are just so good.
Oh my goodness.
So good.
Better than goldfish.
It's not a hard comparison. It's not a hard comparison.
I'm an extra toasty. Extra toasty
How many toes do you have?
Just 10, I promise.
Okay, well, not that we don't judge people have more. But so have you looked at the ingredients in goldfish?
I can't say that I have. I'm not too concerned about health when I'm eating.
That's fair, but it's
those.
not just pure goodness like the Cheez-Its are. Real
understood.
Cheese,
Understood.
good wheat. It's good. It's goodness.
Good quality.
Good quality, not like goldfish. Goldfish is toxic.
I don't think anybody in our church will enjoy that snack the same again. That's for sure.
Probably.
That's for sure.
Of course, I've done this sermon before.
Yeah.
And that's hence the picture of Jacqueline. And soon it became known as the Cheez-It sermon. And so every time Christmas comes around, people give me boxes of Cheez-Its, things of that sort. I was a lot bigger then. So, I don't want people to give me more boxes of Cheez-Its.
Right.
I work hard to get healthy. But so Cheez-Its are not the fourth part of my food groupings right now. So don't give me Cheez-Its, but that became a little fun.
That's awesome. You did really unpack these two ends of a spectrum, the prosperity gospel, which you had shared is offensive to even attach that word to it.
Yeah, it's not, they call it the gospel, but it's this idea, this prosperity doctrine is a false teaching. And that has really, we see it on American television, but you go into the global church, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see one of the exports from America that has really poisoned a lot of the world is the prosperity gospel. And I think that's deeply sad. The poverty gospel is a lot less common, but it's still people who sort of think that, man, I'd just be more holy if I gave it up and judged people who did. Now, again, I think if God calls you to sell it all and go be a missionary, which is what we did in Buffalo, do that.
Yeah.
But the poverty gospel sort of comes with a pride that looks at people who have too much and thinks they're wrong when neither of those are true. Again, it's money makes a really bad goal and a really good tool, and we need to see it as a tool for God's use.
Yeah. My experience has been oftentimes when people just begin to really fall in love with Jesus and walk with Jesus, we do start to think about our things differently, which you said that's good.
God owns it all.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we can take that to the extreme, or at least what I've seen is a lot of people do get to that question sometimes, which is, should I just sell it all and walk away and live with nothing? You know, so I love how you shared that there are some that God will call to do that.
And sometimes God will call us to do that. So, for example, we did that once, and God may indeed call us to do so again. We want to hold our stuff really loosely, our Savior firmly, and if the Lord calls us to do something that requires us to sell it all to pull it off, then let's go.
Yeah.
Because I have friends, I was thinking of someone you wouldn't necessarily know, but he's a church planner, planted a church down in Orlando. Just felt God call, so they liquidated all their assets. They started over, took all their retirement, and I'm not saying that the Lord needs to really tell you to do these things.
Yeah.
And the Lord really blessed it. So there was blessing. The church has grown, and also they recovered financially what they sold, but they felt the Lord calling them to take that great risk for His name and His glory. And I think it's a great and beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they weren't judging others. They weren't saying that's the way Christians must live or anything like that.
Right. So there is this idea of God providing for us, and I can't help but think about that when we talk about poverty gospel or prosperity gospel. And so I'm understanding, and this weekend's message was really clear, really helpful to understand prosperity is not a guarantee, financial prosperity.
Sure.
But what can I expect when we have a scripture that calls God Jehovah Jireh, our provider?
Yeah.
What can we expect as followers of Jesus?
Yeah, my God shall supply our needs according to His riches and glory. So, okay, it's a very important question, and I think it's you have to look in terms of history and Bible. I think it is a good, God-honoring thing that God often blesses His people who are being obedient to Him in financial ways. And I do think that's sometimes, for example, one of the things I was asked to speak a few years ago at Yale University, and they were doing this research project on why they had this thing on extreme poverty, reduction of extreme poverty. And this organization had done a test group, two groups, one with a faith-based component and one without a faith-based component. And there was a statistically significant difference between the faith-based component and the non-faith-based component. They're still teaching people, how to take care of like basic hygiene needs. I mean, we're talking extreme poverty. So they asked me to come and sort of explain the place of conversion, particularly at a scholar level, punctiliar conversion, and why would it lead to a higher economic standard in extreme poverty situations? And the answer was, when people were coming to faith in Christ as part of this poverty alleviation program, they were doing things differently. They weren't doing, we'd say drugs, but chewing certain leaves. They weren't participating in certain activities. They lived their lives differently, and that produced socioeconomic benefits. So we should expect that Christians, when they live rightly, they tend to be better stewards of the money. So that's part of it. But also, too, I do think there's a sense that God blesses His people, and I think that's a beautiful and God-honoring thing. The difference is, in the prosperity gospel, it's a promise and a proof of God's faithfulness. And I don't think that there's a promise or a proof that comes from financial well-being, because in the course of 2,000 years of church history, many Christians have starved to death in poverty and ultimately in famine. So it's not a get-out-of-suffering card or a get-out-of-want card. Paul also pointed out, I've had plenty and I've had none. I've been in lack, I've had want, I've been in need. So, and he's the same one who writes that my God will supply all your needs according to His riches and glory. So what I would say is, we can trust the Lord, and in the normal order of things, God does bless His people, and often those blessings are financial, but they're not promises, they're not proof, and we can walk in that. And so one of the reasons that, I do, when I give, Don and I started by tithing and then sought to increase that from there. I love doing that because I love being generous, but I also believe that God does bless. Yeah. And I've experienced blessings financially because of that as well. Yeah. So I think the being blessed financially is not the same thing as the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel is proof and a promise, whereas when we think in terms of how God provides, it's kind of a normal thing. But the reality is famines come, and Christians have died in famines and been without as well.
Yeah. It's a mercy. It
is. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Good way to put it.
Man, that's a really, really helpful distinction. Thank you for that.
If I had more time, I would have addressed that in the sermon.
Goodness.
But I didn't have more time.
But that's why we have this.
32 minutes. I see the big clock that you put up there. You do it. You put it up there. It's counting
me.
down.
It's me.
Starts screaming
Just
at 2
tapping my
minutes,
foot
1
the
minute and a
whole
half.
time.
You are. I saw you out there.
I loved this point too, that financial decisions are spiritual decisions.
They are.
It's a really, really great reminder for us as followers of Jesus. Would you speak more to that? How should we approach these decisions? If they are spiritual, how should we approach decisions like, should we buy the car?
Yeah.
Should we buy the house? Or maybe for some of us, it's, should I go out to eat this weekend?
Yeah.
You know, should I?
Well, we love to compartmentalize. And what we do in compartmentalizing, we might use the tithe for that. So we say, okay, 1/10 is the Lord's, and then I can do whatever I want with the rest. And I think that's kind of missing what the whole passage we talked about here is. It all comes from Him. The ability to make it all comes from Him. It's all God's. The tithe will be something to remind us, and it's the 10% is enough that you notice when you're given 10%. And it's at the same time, it's not crippling to your finances, but and it's like, okay, it's a reminder, but it's a reminder that God owns it all. So for us to kind of experience that is kind of an ongoing reminder of God's goodness and God's faithfulness in our life that's represented by the tithe, but all of our spiritual decisions, financial decisions, same thing, because God owns it all. If God doesn't own all, then the spiritual decisions are what to do with the 10%, the tithe. That's a spiritual decision, and everything else is an earthly decision, but it's not. It's all. So we want all of our finances submitted to the Lord. So yeah, you should pray about what car you should get, what house you should get. And I think that one of the reasons a lot of Christians get to the place where they can't, in their mind, be generous and proportional is because they've consistently made financial decisions that they're living at 110% of their income.
Yeah.
And they, instead of saying, Lord, maybe I should live at 90% of my income or even 80% of my income so I can be more generous and more proportional. And that's a spiritual decision, not just a financial one. They're all tied together.
Yeah, that's really helpful. You mentioned that importance of the feeling the 10%.
Yeah.
Feeling that
I think it's
tithe.
a thing.
Yeah. Why is that?
There's two things that seem to happen in the scripture that are like this. One of this is the Sabbath. So with the Sabbath, Americans work 5 days typically, but they'd work 6 days and 1 day they'd rest. So you sort of notice it's like, okay, I'm working hard 6 days. 1 day it's set apart as the Lord's. So, but God owns all my week, all my time. So the tithe is 1/10. God owns all of it, but you feel it. You can, when we first, it was, because we kind of went back and forth. Remember, we had that little financial crisis in the middle. I talked about it in the sermon. But we went back and forth. And one of the things that we'd experienced is when we were tithing at first, it's interesting. So we're tithing at first when we were in college. It wasn't that hard. I don't even know what I was making, $150 a week and Donna was working at Duffy's Deli and I was working as a part-time youth pastor. So we'd write that little tithe check and it would be $30, $20, whatever. And then we
felt it.
We felt it. But it wasn't a lot of money. But then when we did that for a while, we tithed for a while, then we got into financial trouble and we stopped tithing and we made bad choices. And then we came back and we were making more money then. So then it's like, okay, we got to get out of so much debt. We thought about declaring bankruptcy. So we had to think about all that. And that was like a lot of money to us to tithe. So we felt it. So at every point we felt it. But the joy of it being proportional is that you're giving according to your proportion. Now, the person who's making $1 million a year and says, I want to tithe, that's $100,000. That's a shocking amount of money to a person. And simultaneously, if you start when you're making $100 a week and that's $10, it's proportional. And I think proportional, that's, people talk about the flat tax, but it's not in the sense of tax. But proportionality makes sense. And it makes our generosity, we feel it. It hurts a little, right?
Yeah. We use the word sacrificial a lot here.
Yeah, I think that's good. At any level, 10% is a sacrificial gift, whether you're making $100 a week or $1 million a year.
Yeah, that's good.
And if you put aside $100 a week for a year, it's actually $1 million by the time it's done. I don't know. I just saw a reel saying that.
I'm trying to crunch some numbers.
It's
and
interest.
Not
it's just from
checking.
the interest.
Oh,
Sorry.
Okay.
That's one of the big trends on the TikTok now.
The TikTok.
Because I'm really into the TikTok.
You're pretty young and hip.
I am. That's what people say about
with
me.
the kids.
With the kids. The kids love it.
I really appreciate how you are really vulnerable, transparent about your own journey.
Yeah.
man, it's not easy. And I imagine you kind of gave us the quick little snippets, but I know behind each of those turns.
We were crying. We
Brutal.
were like, and we had really tried to honor the Lord.
Yeah.
And then, Donna got a good job and I had a decent job and we just got ahead in our spending. Those credit card companies, they'll send you a letter and say, hey, write this check and you move it over here. And, man, it was a cycle of debt swapping. And, we were, I don't think it's a sin to declare bankruptcy or anything of that sort, but we were very close. We just determined that we needed to pay back our creditors. And so we sold one car, went down to one car. I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot. Yeah. But the Lord honored it and we feel good. We seek now, for example, we don't live debt. We don't have debt. We intentionally avoid debt because of just how bad it was for us. Yeah. And that's a good principle in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really helpful, and thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you to Donna as well. I know it was a journey for both of you together in your marriage. So, Ed, if you had any more time this weekend, if I had allowed that 32-minute clock just to stop for a second, harsh clock. what else would you have included in this weekend's message?
Yeah, the one thing that ended up on the cutting room floor was I would like to go through some of the verses that talk about prosperity and explain to people the difference between a promise and proof and actually a principle.
Yeah,
right?
Go ahead. Take us through some.
So, we talked about it some already. But the idea that, this is the sign of God's blessing. I think prosperity is a sign of God's blessing, but this is the sign of God's blessing is the distinction. So some very faithful, godly people have very little, and some very faithfully godly people can have a lot. And I think ultimately it's not the sign of God's blessing. Not a promise. It's not a proof of God's blessing. He promises to give us the kingdom. And there are blessings that come with that. And there are financial blessings that Christians experience. So I think rightfully nuancing between the distinction, because God is not a cosmic vending machine that if I just pray or if I give money, I've seen TV evangelists come on and say, you just, cast your bread upon the water. It'll come back to you 100-fold. And I'm like, yeah, well, first, who wants 100 loaves of soggy bread? But the bigger issue is like that was a joke. That was a little funny, but
I caught it.
Sorry, thanks for getting it. It wasn't that funny.
I didn't want to laugh too hard.
But it wasn't that funny. It was sort of a preacher joke, but also it's kind of like that's. I mean, the Bible does say, "Sow and you'll reap, and sow sparingly and you reap sparingly. So generously reap sparingly." So there is a connection between generosity and blessing. It's just not promise, and it's not proof. That's the distinction I would make, and that ended up on the cutting room floor of the message, so I could talk more about Cheez-Its.
Mm-hmm. I think it was a worthy trade.
Well, we'll see. Okay. We'll see. We'll see if anyone.
It's really helpful.
If there's a rush on Cheez-Its right now, there's an egg shortage. So
again,
and
those eggs are back up.
You don't know this, like
I don't know.
Young family.
I always go for the store brand cheapest carton of eggs I can find.
They're like $1 an egg now.
Oh wait, I feel like it's been that.
No, you have not. You have not. You're like President Bush. He didn't know the price of eggs, so you don't know the price of eggs.
I have never been told that I was like President Bush.
Well, you're not old enough to remember when one of the things that happened is someone asked him what the price of eggs or the price of milk was. He didn't know because he'd been very
hilarious because he was living in the White House.
Because he's living in the White House. Like, how would you know that? Exactly. How would you know that? It's like gotcha, but it's like funny.
I buy eggs about every week.
Do you really? Okay, I want you to look and you come back to me and you say the price of egg. Google online. There's an egg shortage. There's a big avian flu.
I change my grocery store just about every time I go though.
Do you
I'm
really?
not super. Yeah, I don't like getting tied down to one. I'm a Stater Bros, Trader Joe's.
Okay.
Sometimes a Sprouts. We've moved to a different part of Costa Mesa, so now we're really close to a Sprouts. They can get a little pricey.
Yeah, that's where the fancy people shop.
There.
Well, Whole Foods is where the fancy people shop too. Aldi's,
or the Erewhon.
We're Costco. We're Costco.
Costco. Oh man.
And Costco eggs are still decent prices.
Okay, maybe I'll have to get a Costco.
And now that I'm 58, some of the clothes they sell at Costco, they're actually looking pretty good. If I could wear Costco clothes, is that like a line? Is that like too far?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. It shows authenticity.
That's me.
You're sure of who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. I can wear Costco clothes.
Come on, no problem.
Probably shouldn't put that on the recording.
Is your jacket from Costco?
No, it is not.
No, it looks really sharp.
No, it's not. No, nothing I'm wearing currently is from Costco. Maybe the socks.
That's awesome. Ed, thanks so much for being with us this weekend and joining us for the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the If I Had More Time podcast hosted by Mariners Church. We hope to see you next weekend at any of our congregations throughout Southern California or online. To view our locations and service times, be sure to check out our website at marinerschurch.org.